Hi, you are watching SightsIn Plus, and this is Umesh Shivast. Please do subscribe the channel for the HR news, for HR updates, and conversation with the top now CHROs, thought leaders, and business heads. Today, we are going to discuss that do we need the employee well-being law in India? Joining us, Dr. GP Rao is founder and managing partner of GPR HR Consulting LLP, and Ms. Suma RB is a partner, labor and employment at KSK Advocates and Attorneys. Recently, a law is regulated by the Australia, and this law talks about that the employees have right to disconnect after the working hours. Suppose if you connect with the India, so after 6 p.m., employees have right not to respond the mails, not to respond the calls. Like this, you are totally disconnected with the work after working hours. Recently, we did also a survey on LinkedIn. Actually, if you look at after tragic death of Hena Pirail, and the people are furious. People are, concerned about the work-life balance. They're concerned about working hours, excessive working hours, and whatever the culture is, modern culture, whatever we call it here in India. So we did a survey recently on LinkedIn, and we put the same question that like Australia, do we need the law like right to disconnect, or you can call it the employee well-being law. So 90% people have responded that yes, we need employee well-being law in India, and 9% people said no, companies should manage this. So very first, Dr. GP Rao, I would like to know your initial comment on this survey, and if you can also elaborate that how it will help us to improve the working hours or work-life balance in Indian corporate culture.
Thank you, Ramesh. It's a very, very useful debate that you are initiating and having me and Suma on your platform. It's very, very appropriate initiative by you. Before I specifically respond to this, so in a large country like ours, multiple states, multiple cultures, multiple sectors, formal, informal. So we must have a legal support to any implementation. See, it's because of the size, mere size, you can't leave it to the corporate. Number two, no legal mandate works unless the corporates and as well as the society supports. So this is a typical Indian situation. I think you are right asking this question, whether it's only corporate will do or the legal system will do. In my answer, it will be both. Now, coming to the specific question on the well-being, it's not that we are not doing anything in India. You take out all the law, Factory Act will talk about hours, Maternity Act will talk about this, child care. So we have got so many acts. We're touching upon the wellness of employees. So that's there. But the point is whether this is adequate, whether the enforcement is happening, whether any culturally we are ready for this. So that should be the moot point, in my opinion. So culturally, the society should welcome people getting formally disconnected from the workplace. Is that right? The culture, society should, yes. Corporate should welcome this, saying that it's fine. We will be able to maintain productivity, our progress, our growth, our operations despite the system. And of course, the legal system to help that. So all three are needed. These were my opening thoughts. I will look for views of Suma also.
Great thoughts. Suma, first I would like to know your opening comment on this survey. Do we need the law like Australia, right to disconnect? We can name any another, like employee well-being or so. Second, if you look at the labor laws right now, maybe for the shops and establishment, maybe for the Factories Act, maybe the recently, which is another codes of the wages coded, occupational and health safety codes like. Do we already have such laws? in our system, we are not able to enforce them. Ah, there is a flexibility. How do you see the current law in India?
Thank you, Romesh, for calling me to discuss with Mr. GP Rao on this topic. So, first thing I want to clarify here is Australian law, what we are talking about, right to disconnect. It doesn't grant absolute right to employees to disconnect after the working hours. It says employee can reasonably refuse to monitor, read, or respond to the work-related mails or communication or attempts made by the employee to connect with the employee, the employer to connect with the employee. So this right is not absolute, right? So there are certain grounds that are also laid down under this law, as far as my understanding goes. So the reasonableness can be determined in certain circumstances. What is the reason for contacting the employee after the working hours? Whether that's reasonable. What is the level of disruption that the employer is causing to the work-life balance? Whether the employee is being compensated, when he's asked to work beyond his working hours. And there is also roles and responsibility of the employee that is also taken into consideration. So there are various aspects that Australian legislation is also looking at, right? It's not just that they are saying okay, employee can disconnect and go after the working hours. So reasonableness is something that they are recognizing. Under Indian law also we have like working hours, as Mr. GP Rao said, we have overtime concept. Under the new labor code, occupational health and safety code, they're also bringing in the concept of consent of the worker to work overtime. So I don't see this Indian law doesn't support this, or right to disconnect is not recognized under the Indian law. It is recognized in the form of overtime for that matter. So, of course, consent under the existing laws is not a mandatory requirement, but once the labor code is implemented, that will also be brought into force, right? So, considering that this is not, the concept of right to disconnect is not new to India. We have laws like Factories Act, shops and commercial establishment clearly define the hours of work and overtime for that matter. It also says you need to compensate the employees for working extra hours. But of course, at the ground level, this is not strictly adhered to because of various reasons. It may be from the employee side where employee is not asking for proper implementation of it because of socio-economic scenario. Someone is feared of losing a job if not if doesn't work extra hours or meet the requirements. From the employer side also there are like certain aspects, and legislation when it comes to government is also not very serious as far as the implementation of these conditions of work are concerned. So hence as I mentioned, this is not an absolute right, but of course Indian laws also recognize this, and employee awareness is the key to bring in proper work culture, or when implement employee welfare or well-being measures for that matter.
Absolutely. You rightly said we have the existing laws in India. But if you see in Factories Act, there are 9 working hours, 48 hours, there is
Right.
the limitation 5 weeks, maybe around 5 days week, 6 days that could be. But 48 hour in a week, that is limitation. In shops and establishment, we do have the similar kind of limitation. But in new codes, when we see, we were also talking about 4 day work week and
Right.
48 hours working. So it means 12 hours in a day if we calculate for the 4 days. So
Right.
is it somehow, backfiring? Do you think, and
Yeah.
how do you see if, but this is still not implemented, and some of the states are also giving the flexibility, even if it is going for the implementation. Maybe if you can want to choose 5 days, you can continue the 5 days. Means similar, it is 9 hours working. But little flexibility, little flexibility, little flexibility. Sometime, there is no purpose of law, there is no purpose of rule. As you are talking about this right to disconnect, there is also clause in emergency case you can contact. Emergency is mentioned as well there. So that flexibility, but more flexibility, I think sometimes dilutes also the law. How do you think about this?
So Of course, 12 hours, what we are talking about, may not be practical to implement considering Indian scenario where we travel 2 hours to work, right? Imagine if someone has to travel 2 hours for work and work for 12 hours. How can he rest? Right? So, and Indian law, even the courts for that matter, have been recognizing employees' right to rest. So, if you see any law implemented, like be it Factories Act, whatever, so law specifically says there has to be gap of 12 hours between two shifts. You can't, like, bring in one person in the very next shift for that matter. So, considering this, while the parliament is proposing 12 hours in a day, but when it is implemented and definitely if it is challenged before the court, I feel, maintainability of such flexibility or, 12 hours of work, again, it will be subject to court interpretation, and chances of court saying this is not feasible considering the, Indian work scenario is high. So hence, I mean, it's too early to comment on whether this 12 hours works or not, but definitely that will be subject to challenge when once the new labor code is implemented. So coming to the other aspects, as you mentioned, of course, we have Factories Act, Shops and Establishments Act, which specifically says 9 hours, 40 in a day and 48 hours, and also fixes overtime hours for that matter. And it specifically says you have to, like, adhere to overtime hours as well as pay the employee twice the wages for that overtime period. Now, in this scenario, one thing I want to bring into, bring here is these Factories Act are applicable to specific, manufacturing sector, shops and establishment to commercial sector. We have other workforces as well, be it like, self-employed or gig workers, platform workers, or unorganized sector, home-based workers for that matter. Even take us like professional like us, legal and, professionals from accountancy background. We are not covered under labor laws for that matter. So most of the workforce is still not brought under these laws. Factories Act and Shops Establishment, what we are talking about, it's mainly like, focused on organized workforce for that matter. In that scenario, and like lot of implementation requirement is there, lot of, legislature initiative that need to be taken, in India to bring in all, welfare measures in respect of all sectors and all workforce for that matter. So what we have is currently not sufficient. Definitely look forward for more, developments in this regard.
So, Dr. GP Rao, first I would like to know your comment on this two new codes which are introduced by the Indian government and which are implemented somehow and which are still to be enforced. Second, my question would be, Suma has highlighted very interesting point, not only for the people, those who are in regular employment, those who are gig, those who are in freelance. So how to, provide the work-life balance them. This is also. Third point is that now, post-pandemic, when the people started working from home in remote working, so that is more, staggered kind of work is there. There's no working time, maybe any time that is being started, any time can be ended. And the working hours are a little more long when you're working remotely. How do you see these all the aspects?
First thing about the codes. So there are good things like amalgamation of different laws into fewer number of codes. That's good. Definitions are good. Intent is good. But then it's not seeing the light of the day. So the more the delay, the more the doubt. Number two, if you go deeper into it, there are many things are not clear. There are a lot many gray areas. Implementation is going to be very, very difficult. So that's the stage. But there are good things. It's welcome that. Coming to Suma's point, our problem, see, the white collar who are supposed to manage the well-being of the large number of blue collar. These white collar people are the real victims of this stressful work. See, law can be there that 8 hours, but then the so-called supervisor, the so-called manager, So he feels that no, he has to be there to continue the operations. He has to see that everything is in place. So that extra burden on him to ensure that things are working. So that is causing a big concern. You will see more number of stress cases are happening in this segment. This is number one. Number two, as Suma said, is we have a large number of informal sector, very, very large, uncovered. You say factory, it is only for industrial employment. You say ESI, only to a few people. There is a limit that only so and so will get covered. If you say a posh act, or if you say maternity, everywhere you will see there's a lot of limitations. No, everything is limited. So fine, intent may be good. So the coverage is never comprehensive. Now coming to your real last one, the remote working or work from anywhere sounds very lucrative. That means we have got all the freedom in life to work from anywhere. No, if you see from the others, but look at from the other side. Talk to the people who work from home or work from anywhere. They are putting in more hours of work because culturally the company assumes that is available to us. Earlier, he has gotten to the bus, he has gone. So we say that he's not available. Now, since he is at home, we consider that he's available. The second one is, since he is not at the workplace, there he is suffering from FOMO, fear of missing out. Am I missing out something? If I don't pick up this call, so I'm not connected. If I don't respond to this, I'm not important. If I don't do this, I may miss out on promotion or increment. So the whole thing is working out him so that availability, being available is a demand on him. So this is what is happening. It's a bigger problem. So more legal is very important. I mean, people like Suma, they must tell us whether 8 hours is the right time, 9 hours is the right time, 4 hours, 4 days or 5 days, all okay. And whether it's commuting, non-commuting, hybrid work. More important is the mindset of the corporate world that we are obliged, we are responsible, we are accountable for the well-being of my employees. Any system, any process, any measure is impairing his freedom, is impairing his wellness. That we will not do it. It has to come from the corporate world. The last one is in the society where the value systems get evolved, get stabilized, institutionalized. The longer hours of work getting associated with dedication, it's not a right value system. I mean, if you work for 10 hours, you are more dedicated. This conclusion is not right. That changes must come in the society. So these are the three things. Legally, yes, wellness should get covered, more comprehensive, covering all sectors, covering formal, informal sector, focusing more on the white collar. Because blue collar, at least we know that there is a shift working. Nobody normally bothers a blue collar worker after the shift is finished. This disturbance is happening more in the white collar. White collar. I mean, more happening in that. So this is how legal system must be done. Mindset change in the corporate world has to come, and the value system in the society must come. My
Right. I think very beautifully you have explained. Suma, if you see, suppose if government try to have a new law, keeping in mind the voice of people, what should be the clauses? What should be the new clauses that should be implemented in the law? And even if try to modify a little, review the existing laws and try to focus on the enforcement, then what would be your advice?
As I mentioned, Romesh, first thing would be like, we need to cover all sectors, all categories of workforce. So every time an employer challenges before the court of law saying, okay, against any law, legal provision, the first contention would be say, this law doesn't apply to us, right? So that sort of ambiguity should not be there. That sort of time taken to interpret, to just to tell whether this is applicable or not by the apex code, it's too long, right? Considering these legislation should focus on bringing in law which are unambiguous and also cover all sort of category of workforce and different sectors for that matter. Of course, we can't implement, as Mr. GP Rao said, the laws applicable to blue collar worker cannot be implemented for a managerial role or to a professional services for that matter. So things would vary. So considering these aspects, law should be formulated for that matter. Of course, it's difficult to frame such laws, but yeah, some steps need to be taken towards that as well. Second thing is that, uh, you know, when it comes to employers should also be made aware of their obligations, and employees should also be made aware of their rights. So proper education, bringing awareness among the workforce as well as the employer is very much necessary, and government should act as a facilitator than being an inspector of checking the non compliances for that matter. So that's one thing. I think that's very important step that need to be taken by the government. uh, Third thing is that there has to be some cultural or socio-economic change for that matter. See, because what is happening today, people are afraid. Our talent is abundant, our human resource is abundant. Today, if I say, okay, I'm not going to check my email after the work hours, tomorrow I have the fear of saying so, because I have the fear of losing the job or getting may not get good appraisal or whatever it is. So that fear should go. That fear will go only when there is socio-economic upliftment in India, right? So when there are jobs, abundant jobs, then people are easy to get jobs, easy to uh, continue in a particular job. So all this is not just from the legal perspective that we need to look into. This is some holistic change that we need to look into, and the government should work towards that. When people lose the fear of losing a job, then definitely things will change. And definitely we just need not open up only on LinkedIn or somewhere, but yeah, definitely we can negotiate or bargain with the employers. So all these things, everything like legal, economic scenario, everything has to evolve and change for that matter.
Dr. GP Rao would like to add here something.
If you see, if you have to give a recommendation to the government, of course, the corporate world needs to be get involved. Number one is, one day I think we should go to a situation that there's nothing like overtime. See, a person can only work for 8 hours. See, if you just cannot do that, no. I'm telling you this because I worked in a company where we had 245,000 people. We said there's no overtime in our company. Nothing happened in that company. I'm telling you, I worked in that company. I'm telling you, nothing happened. People managed. Operation theater continued. The crane continued. The ingot moved. The vehicle is there. The driver didn't get down just because we refused overtime. He didn't get down. So, I mean, he knew. I mean, he has to drop his boss. Like, he'll take those extra 15 minutes. So this is what I'm saying is, can we think about a situation of no overtime? That's number one. Number two, in the work, when it comes to the responsibility of people, can we do something? I understand in one of the Tata's company, they said, you can't send a mail after working hours. I mean, this should come slowly, this practice come. So the manager has to explain why he's calling you. He should ask me, sir, I would like to speak to you. Can I disturb you for 5 minutes? He should send a message to me. I'm just saying, that kind of culture should come. That kind of culture should come, that so you cannot encroach into my time. The third important thing is, we are responsible. The company, corporation, the employer should take that responsibility, that I am responsible for the physical well-being, the financial well-being, and the mental well-being. I am responsible. For that, whatever is required to be done, I will do. And if there is a mental issue, it is not a stigma. I am supposed to helping him. So that responsibility should come from that. These are the three things. Last is in India, many laws. I mean, I know more about Posh. So it is not working out in smaller company. I advise a company, the employer said, sir, let us not keep women employees. I said, why? No, if you keep, no, there's always a risk. I mean, you just see, that means what are we doing? Another case is a woman coming to me is telling that now I can fix this manager. See how it is getting misused. I've given you two extremes. And the last one is not ready to give a complaint, not ready to face that committee. So these are all issues that is coming. That means intent may be good, implementation is a big issue in our system. So our legal system needs to work on very clear rules, very user friendly systems. The labor authorities becoming more facilitators. So that must come. So I told you about the overtime. I told you about the white collar. I can't encroach into your time. I need your permission to send a mail to you or talk to you. That must come. And employer taking the responsibility of the well-being. And the last one, of course, I already talked about the society. That in the society, you should say that longer hours is not dedication. Uh, Doing my job with dharma, in my karma, that is more important than doing longer hours without applying the principle dharma. If I am doing longer hours, actually, I am not only harming my health, I am harming the work-life balance. I am damaging the very culture. I'm not able to give time to my family. So I'm doing a greater damage. That realization should come in the society. I put it into different perspectives. I hope it makes sense.
Really, absolutely very nice points. Companies, organizations need to set a culture. They need to create some boundaries, and I think that is very important. Suma, what would be your take on this? That how one part is the law, okay, and what is another the responsibility of organizations? How they create the boundaries, how they set their own rules. That is also very important. What would be your take on this?
When it comes to setting the boundaries or framing the policies are concerned, each company will have a different take on that. As mentioned by GP Rao, of course, it's easy to set boundaries or to define policies in a larger organization, but organizations with limited resource, financial resources for that matter, it gets very difficult to define things. But at the same time, since we are talking about try to disconnect, definitely, the reasonableness for calling an employee to work beyond the, workers, that's very much necessary. Of course, legislature like in Australia can specifically spell out under what circumstances you have to call an employee, and that can be implemented by the employers also. So there has to be some guiding principles that's brought in within the legislation so that that is followed by the employers, because if it is left to the employers, definitely each one will have their own take, and there won't be any uniformity, or there may not be any proper implementation, and the employees will suffer. So considering that, of course, Indian law in a gist has similar provisions as that of Australian law for that matter, like speaking about overtime or limits of hours, limits on hours of work and things like that. But that specifically they have to spell out, what are the reasonable grounds to call an employee to work beyond the work hours or during holiday or leaves for that matter, so that there are, same thing is followed across the board for that matter. So that's one thing. And second one is, of course, as I mentioned, like many employers are now proactive, and even they come to us, to draft policies which are like more employee friendly for that matter, be it from working hours aspect, perspective, or from like including sabbatical leave and all other things. Now employers are like more pro, having adopting pro employee approach, and they have been like granting unpaid leaves or sabbatical leaves for that matter. And technically in those scenario, employee will have, will disconnect from their work, and they will have like a good break for that matter. So um, things are evolving, so we need to see more from legislature perspective. Once the legislature specifically spells out what are the circumstances or grounds for for right to disconnect. Probably all employers will, most of the employers will follow that, and there will be uniformity, and the employee wellness is taken care of.
Absolutely. Yeah, but definitely. This can be recommended to have in the law in India. That may be specific for the employee well-being. Nothing is wrong to this. But yes, this is also true that we do have already existing laws which are talking
Right.
about almost the similar what the other countries may having, maybe the Western countries are having. Important is how do we enforce the law. That is also very important. Second, this is also the responsibility of government, how the government create the awareness, how the educate maybe the employees as well, also to the employers. This is also very important. Thank you so much, Dr. GP Rao and Suma, for joining the conversation and sharing your wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.